My topic this morning is thinking big, and I was remembering a story that I read a long time ago. I don't know if it was Dr. Holmes who had actually told the story at one point, or if it was someone else, but that's beyond. Uh, it doesn't really matter. But it's the story of the white leopard that lived in the zoo in Washington D.C., and it was in a 12 by 12-foot cage. And for many years, it just paced around the cage every day. And came the time when the zoos throughout the world started looking at the conditions in which the animals lived, and they decided that this white leopard really needed to have a lot more freedom than it already had. And so they built this beautiful area. They opened it up, 3 acres of land with lovely trees and lush grasses and so on, so that the tiger could enjoy more freedom than it did have. It could roam around a different kind of habitat. And it was a big media splash that was going to happen the day that that opened, because people really loved that tiger, and they were thrilled to know that it was going to have a new habitat. And the people who worked for the zoo were especially thrilled, because they were so excited, having watched the construction and knowing that the tiger was going to be relatively free compared with how it had been. And so the big moment came, and they opened the door of the cage, and the tiger just sat there. And finally, it prodded to go out into the new area, and it immediately found itself a corner. And for the rest of its life, it stayed within a 12 by 12-foot space in that area. It did not move beyond it. And it is such an example of how we are programmed, how how we're creatures of habit. And when something becomes a habit, we tend to cling to that. And it's the same thing with elephants. You've probably all heard the stories of how elephants are trained to stay in one spot. And there's a chain put around one leg of the elephant, and the other end is connected to a post. And the elephant can only go round and around in a circle for a certain amount of space. And when the chain is removed, it continues to do that. It's basically called taming the elephant. I think most of us can figure out one or two habits that we have that have been consistent, and things that we don't really feel that we can overcome, and don't even think about overcoming them because they've become such a habit. And the thing is, we have to know that there is an opportunity for something much bigger than this, that there's an opportunity to move into a beautiful environment if we're not already in that beautiful environment. And that environment is not just in the exterior, it is in the interior as well. It's inside each of us, creating a more beautiful environment so that we're joyful and happy and content with our lives, and positive, and we have faith in the very best that can happen. Jennifer and I were just talking the other day about Ernest Holmes' expression, which was on the Bloomberg screens after 9/11, the morning after 9/11, when all of the financial world went into work. And across their screens was written, "Prepare yourselves for the best that life has to offer," with Ernest Holmes' name. And I'm sure a lot of people thought, well, who is Ernest Holmes? But what an amazing expression. And so, are we preparing ourselves for the best that life has to offer? Are we preparing ourselves? Are we prepared to get out of those cages, out of those limitations, the things that have kept us there, for perhaps most of our lifetime, or at least for a few years? We don't develop these habits overnight. But once we do develop them, how do we break free of them? That's what we really need to be thinking about. Are we ready to take advantage of this and to move into the unlimited place that is possible for each of us when our faith is strong, and when we're living in spirit and we're connected to spirit? We have untold talent and abilities, things that we may never have even thought about, things that we may have suppressed, and they're just there inside us waiting to express. Have you always wanted to sing? Have you always wanted to play the piano? But you thought, oh, well, I don't have much of a voice. I'll never learn the piano. It takes so long. Everything takes some time. Everything takes some practice. How important is it? What are our priorities? We really need to look at these things. There's this whole invisible world out there that is just there to support us. Spirit everywhere around us and in, as, and working through us. Dr. Holmes repeatedly wrote about that in each of his books. You'll find that expression. God is in, as, and through us, and it uses us to express. And we get to imprint upon it exactly what it is going to be that we're expressing. And if we don't like what it is, then we better start imprinting something new upon us. Last week, I was talking about great possibilities, and I was using the book, A New Design for Living, which was the second last book that Dr. Holmes wrote. And it is so much simpler to read than his initial work in 1926, which was then again edited in 1936. Some of his earlier books are a bit more difficult to read because they're basically written in a Victorian language. But this one is written in contemporary language, and it is so practical and it is so easy to use, and I absolutely love it. I can't get enough of it. I just keep, reading and reading and rereading it. And so we need to ask ourselves what our lives really look like. Dr. Holmes in this book says, some of us, um, basically have containers for life that look like an eyedropper, and others have ones that look like spoons, and others have ones that look like buckets. I mean, you can make them much bigger than that if you want to, or much smaller, maybe not a lot smaller. And he said a lot of people just live in that eyedropper mentality. You know, life gives them a little bit. And he said then there are some who live, with an eyedropper in some parts of their lives and a bucket in others. And we can perhaps all identify with that, saying, well, my life looks a little small in that area, but in this area it's magnificent, it's big. The thing is that that magnificence, that bigness, is possible for all of us. It's possible in every part of our lives. It's a matter of us examining these containers that we have, the minds that we are using, and seeing exactly what it is that is in them. And Holmes said, we really need to have faith, faith in that creative intelligence. That we need to understand that spirit is behind all things and again working in, as, and through us. And sometimes faith might be difficult for us, but we don't have any faith, as I said, I think it was last week, we don't have any problems with faith in gravity. Dr. Holmes mentions this in the book too. He says, if you stand in your head, provided you have good balance and you've always been able to stand in your head, if you stand on your head, then the universe supports you, gravity supports you in standing on your head. It doesn't immediately turn you to your feet. And it's the same, and you don't go floating off in the air. And he said, if you're lying down, resting on a bed, you're not going to suddenly just have your body float up and go around the room. And and uh, it's that way with everything. He says, if you jump off a roof, you're going to go down. You're not going to go up. We know this. If somebody said, don't jump, you're going to fly up. We say, come on, you're crazy. We know better than that. We also know that when we flip the switch um, on a wall panel in our homes, that the light's going to come on. Provided we're not in, some sort of power failure. But we know that we don't doubt that at all. We know that when we turn on the switch in the car or push the button as the newer cars have now, that the engine is going to start. We don't doubt that. We we don't stop and wonder if we're breathing. We just take it for granted we're breathing. Our hearts are beating. We take that for granted. We absolutely know that. I mean, we're alive, so we know that those things are happening. Where the difficulty comes in is when we start to be concerned about whether or not we could change things according to our thoughts. And one of the things that I read somewhere else this morning, and I don't remember where it was, it might have been in the Science of Mind textbook about consciousness. Because we use the word consciousness a lot. And basically, what does consciousness mean? Consciousness is self-awareness, and it is about that awareness of who we are, that each of us is an expression of God. And Ernest Holmes talked about planting a seed in the soil. And he said, and use this as a metaphor for ourselves. He said, the seed is planted and it only knows to grow. And he said, and the soil only knows to provide it with everything that it needs to grow. But it doesn't ask itself, the soil doesn't ask itself how it's going to do it. The soil doesn't know how it's doing it. It just does it. And in the same way, we need to understand that God in us and as us and expressing through us, this power within us doesn't stop to think about how it's going to work, doesn't stop to think about whether or not we deserve it or not. Um, it doesn't discern what's happening. It only knows to make it happen. And so it's we who plant the seeds, and we need to be really mindful of the seeds that we're planting. And that doesn't mean being going around frightened, thinking, oh my goodness, I wonder what I thought of today that's going to create a problem for me. No, 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 no. It's about being in that state of positivity, of feeling that connection with the divine, and of releasing the idea that we have no power. How often have you heard people say, oh, I have no power over that, have no control over that? That's just the way it is. That's just the way my life is. That's not the way that life has to be. There is something in us that is so much bigger than we are, so much bigger than our physical selves. And we need to really, really remember that, to understand that, and to just release that idea, and to know that just as gravity behaves the way it does, that the law of cause and effect behaves the way it does in our lives, and it always has. We maybe never had a name for that law until we came into this teaching. But the thing, I mean, there were some things that we called karma. Well, you did this, and so this is your karma. Well, we don't believe in karma in that sense. We believe in cause and effect. We don't believe that if you've done something bad to somebody that it's going to come around in another lifetime and you're going to suffer miserably. We all have a choice about changing things right here and right now, and we don't have to buy into any concepts about what happened before. Dr. Holmes says, are we spending our time looking backward, or are we willing to turn around and look forward? Because if we're not, it's like being stuck in the mud, and you just can't get out. You're just there looking at the dark side of life all the time. And it is never too late to change that. And it doesn't matter what. If we look at something in our lives that we don't feel is working, then what we really need to do is to say, okay, well, what's been my thinking about this? And where did it come from? And if we don't know where it came from, then start right now replacing that idea with another idea. We have faith in so many things. We have faith in the sunrise and faith in the sunset. And as I said, we have faith in our breath and in our heartbeats and in so many things in our lives. We just know that they work the way that they work. We also know that if we go out sailing, if we're on a magnificent ship going somewhere, we're not going to fall off the edge of the earth. Remember when people thought, well, I don't mean that we were there to remember, but we have read about people who thought that if they sailed too far, they would fall off the edge of the earth. We know so much more than that. We know so much better than that. And imagine what the fear would be to sail too far, to fall off the edge of the earth, or what the fear would be if we actually thought that the sun wouldn't rise or set. We would be living in chaos all the time. And some of us are living in chaos some of the time because of our fears, because of things that we have been taught, when there is no relevance to them at all. As long as we are forward looking, forward thinking, and believing and knowing, then everything in our lives start to work in a totally different way. And what happens is, not only does the universe support us, but people are attracted to us who will help us support our ideas and our thoughts. And if you don't believe this, then choose something that isn't working in your life and start saying, you know, I know it works. I can do this. I can. I know I can. And it's not I think I can. It's I know I can. Now, I was thinking of the little boy who was videoed on the news after the election of Barack Obama. And the next day he was on his way to get some ice cream, and it just showed him maybe 100 feet from an ice cream stand, and he was skipping along and he was saying, "Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can." You know, this hope, this amazing hope that obviously was there in his parents, but people have said to him, "Yes, you're a little African American boy, and you can do anything because look at what the president has done." So let's look inside ourselves and see where it is that we might have some doubt because of conditioning from the past, and just say, "Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can." And allow ourselves to be supported by the universe, allow ourselves to be supported by others, and to just dismiss anyone who says, "No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. You don't know how to do this. Who do you think you are?" You know, people who can't imagine themselves in a bigger place themselves, who try to put you down. And that does happen from time to time. I know I had it happen to me in a much younger life, and I learned very quickly just to, not be in the presence of those people, if I could avoid it at all, because that wasn't the way that I believed my life was going to be or would ever be. And and so we have to be conscious of these things, consciousness, self-awareness. We toss around the word consciousness a lot. And I was just thinking last night, maybe there are people who don't really know what we're talking about when we're saying consciousness, but it really is about being aware of who we are and what we're doing, as I said earlier, and not to settle. In his book, Dr. Holmes suggests that if you had a friend who had made his or her transition and had left you in his or her will with $1 million as a legacy, um, but you weren't going to get it for a year. It was going to take a year, and it was on a specific date it was going to be delivered to you. Imagine how you would think. You would be so excited about all of the possibilities, about all of the things that $1 million offered to you in terms of financial freedom, of perhaps helping others, of giving to charities, of whatever it is that your passion might be, and the joy that you would feel around that. He said, just think about that. Well, and then he suggests that that's the way that we need to think about everything in our lives. Whatever it is that we wish our lives to look like, if we want joy and if we want good relationships and friendships and whatever it is that makes our lives feel so complete and so fulfilled, then 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 just imagine yourself having that. 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever it's is going to give you that thrill, that excitement. And what that is called in science of mind is a mental equivalent. I've used that terminology before, not a lot, because I try not to jump into a lot of jargon that people might not understand. But the mental equivalent basically is the image that we have of anything. If it's having a beautiful garden, and we hold that image, then we are prompted to do certain things to have that beautiful garden. If we want a different job, if we want personal growth, whatever it is, imagine what it's like to be there. I mean, athletes today, a lot of them are performing um, in a greater way because, first of all, they are imagining things in their minds. They are being trained to do that. Those who are doing the quadruple jumps and figure skating, they've been practicing that in their minds with their coaches as well as on the ice. And I remember reading a study that was done at a university with a basketball team right at the beginning of the season, and half the team was invited to practice in the gym every day, and the other half was told to sit at home in a comfortable chair and imagine themselves shooting baskets and the ball going into the baskets. And at the end of a month of training, those who were seated at home shooting baskets in their minds and those in the gym were doing exactly the same thing. Our consciousness, our awareness is giving a message to God within that this is the way that we want our lives to be. This is how I'm going to shoot that basket, and that is going to be the result. And so it's the same with everything in our lives, except that we don't necessarily believe it. And the time has come that we really need to believe it, where we need to put faith to work. I've told the story years ago, I think, about the woman named Goody Cable, which is truly her name. And she lived in just outside of Portland, Oregon. And there was an old dilapidated hotel that she wanted to buy, and she had absolutely no money. And her idea for that hotel was that she was going to renovate it, and she was going to have each room represent a different author. There'd be the Ernest Hemingway room, and there'd be the F. Scott Fitzgerald room, and the Gertrude Stein room. And the rooms would be decorated according to the personalities and the likes of what that particular author might have had. And uh, and she could see all of this in her mind. And so she had a plan, and she had an architect who could do the redesign. She had a friend who was a decorator who could help her with the decorating. She had a group of friends who were willing to help her with anything that needed to be done in terms of the building construction. But she needed money for materials, and she needed money to hire some people that she really needed. So she went to a bank and to the bank manager and asked for a loan, and he said, no, not going to do that. So she went to another one, and another, and another. She went to 28 bankers who turned her down, said that really there was no way that this was going to happen. And the 29th banker bought into her, understood her passion, understood her commitment to this, her tenacity, and that she had a dream and she had people who could help make her happen. And he said, I will give you the loan. And so she went ahead, she opened the hotel. This is probably now 40 or 50 years ago. And the last time I checked, that hotel had never had a vacancy. And every year she brought back together for 1 week all of the people who had helped her, and for a free week at the hotel, so that they could celebrate together. And so, the question is, are we willing to go the distance with things? That particular story, the first time I heard it was at a Silamar, our church conference, the Centers for Spiritual Living Now conference, that happened every year outside of Monterey, California. And it was Alan Cohen, the prolific metaphysical writer that a lot of people haven't heard of, but he's written, I think he's just finished his 28th book. And Alan is an old friend of mine. He lives on the island of Maui. And uh, and Alan told that story. And then he asked if anybody in the audience had a story like that. And there were a few people, but the one that was, well, there were several that were really fascinating, but one was related to what Goody did. And a woman stood up and she said, I'm an artist. And she said, I want to buy a 3-acre property out in the country, and I want to have a home on that property, and it's a place where I want to paint. And Alan asked her if she could see this in her mind, what it looked like. And she described this house to a T, and her studio in the house that had skylights in it that brought in natural light so that she could paint in natural light. And then the out of doors, what it looked like so that she could paint outside if she wanted to. And she had room for 3 horses. She had every little detail in her mind. And he said, because you know that, he said, and you're holding on to that image, it is going to happen for you. And she said, but I just have no money. And he said, are you willing to go to a bank? And she said, well, I could do that. And he said, if you get turned down, are you willing to go to 2, 3, 4, 28, 29, 30? And she kind of gulped and she said, oh, I guess I could do that. And a man stood up toward the back of the room and he said, I am a mortgage broker and I can make this happen for you. Come and talk to me after we finish today. You know, we need to be expressing what it is that we wish to create in our lives, and things will show up. Now, it doesn't mean we even have to express it out loud. We can, but holding it in our hearts, having it alive in our minds, makes such a big difference. To the degree that we affirm our faith, things manifest for us. And affirming our faith means that we know that we are connected to this power that is so much greater than our physical selves, and that it is all it is, and that it is everywhere present. And so, as Dr. Holmes says, we have to make ourselves good containers of God, filling ourselves with good ideas, with good health, with happiness, with prosperity, with wonderful relationships. He said, are we just going to have the image of a little bit of good, of a little bit of health, of a little bit of prosperity? Because if that's our image, then that's exactly what we're going to have, a little bit. Instead, we need to expand ourselves, expand our vision, expand our mental equivalent, and have a big idea and be thinking big about what it is that we want our lives to look like. So not just for ourselves, but for the world. Imagine if everybody in the world could just see peace, could only see love. Imagine what a difference that would make. So is our faith weak or is it strong? Let's do a reality check on that. And if it isn't strong, then let's start practicing. I keep saying it's like going to the spiritual gym. Start practicing. Look at the things you do have faith in, and then start practicing. And most metaphysicians will say, start with something small. Like start with finding the parking spot, that it's always there for you, whatever it happens to be. And when it becomes consistent, remember there's no big or small in the mind of God. And so everything is possible. If you can manifest a parking spot, you can manifest anything. If you can manifest $100, you can manifest $100,000. That's the kind of thing that it's more difficult for us to focus upon, to remember. And Dr. Holmes says, do you want just a few $100s in your life, or do you want thousands? And also, in order to make that real, what would you do with it? What would you do with all of that money if you had it? I've shared before, when I do prosperity classes, I hand out checks, universal checks written on the universal bank, and I invite people to write in the amount of money they would like to have in a year, and it's signed by God. And and if people are just writing in a little bit of money, I'm suggesting they write in a whole lot more. And I think I've shared this, that I once wrote in $250 million. I had a class of about 15 people, and there was all this stuff going on, people whispering and mumbling and grumbling. And when we talked about how much we'd written, when I said that, it was like, well, what would you ever do with? I mean, who needs that? You don't need that. People were quite upset. One person said, "Yay, Carrie!" And then when they were all finished, when it got quiet again, I said, and this was back when the war in Afghanistan was really had Afghanistan had just been devastated and decimated. And I said, well, maybe I would go and help to rebuild Afghanistan. And all of a sudden, there was just this total shift in perception. And and people started to see, oh, if I had a lot of money, then maybe I could do some big things with that money. It isn't all about me having so much that I can go out and float diamonds and, massive cars and all those kinds of things. To me, those kinds of things are just so unimportant. But then what was really interesting is I happened to keep that check that I'd written. It just, was just in my book. And about 6 months later, I was contacted by a group of financial people in Vancouver, and they were going to go to Laos, and because they wanted to help um, relieve the poverty of the people in Laos, and they wanted to do different things. Only boys could be educated at that time, and so I was given the job of putting together a plan for educating boys and girls and taking them to higher education, and how that could be done, and how villages could help to support this. And it happened that the budget was $250 million. And that didn't connect at the time. And it was only when I was actually in Laos, or as some people pronounce it, Laos, when I was there, all of a sudden I thought, oh, $250 million is 250 million. And I didn't say that, uh, I didn't say I was going to go and do something in Laos. But my whole idea, the whole concept of that $250 million check I wrote was so that I could do some good work with it somewhere, help some other country. Um, I mean, to me, it was just astonishing. Haven't tried it for myself. I don't mean that I would ever write a check for me for $250 million, unless it was for some amazing cause. But the thing is, we can think really small, or we can think really big, or we can think somewhere in the middle, but it's what feels right to us. It's what our hearts are expressing about, this is mine to do. I have all this talent, all this ability. Use me, God. There's a beautiful song, Use Me. And if every morning when we wake up, we would say, good morning, God, use me. Let me know what is mine to do today. Let me know what you would have me do today. Strengthen our faith. Let our faith be strong, and remind ourselves every single day, I believe, I accept, I know. When we get to that place of knowing, there's absolutely nothing that can stop us. There's a power that is greater than I am, that is working in, as, and through me, always. Not just some of the time, it is always there. And it will deliver an eyedropper full, or it will deliver a bucket full, or it will deliver a barrel or more, depending upon what our thinking is really like. And if we're having thoughts of doubt, remember, one thought will neutralize another. And so that's when we change a thought. When we're thinking about negative things, when we're thinking, oh, poor me, when we're thinking, oh, my life is over, I'll never have another opportunity, whatever it happens to be, change the thought. Because God only knows to say yes. And we don't have to know how. We just have to know the what. Remember, faith dissipates doubt, and hope replaces fear, and love replaces hate. Let us remember that. It is so important. So right here and right now, today, let's create a stronger faith. Let's move into being big, big thinkers. And if we're eyedroppers right now, then let's at least move into being a spoonful, and move from being a spoonful into being a bucketful and greater. And just know that, like the seed in the ground, that the soil is nurturing it and supporting it in growth, that God is what is nurturing us and supporting us in growth. And we can be big thinkers and create big results in anything we wish to do in our lives. And so it is. And I'm so grateful that you're all here today. It's wonderful to have you join us. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. We'll be listening intently to see what protocols are in place for health, and hoping that we can get back together again very soon. And I will let you know as soon as we know. So do stay tuned to your email messages that come through. I know you get a lot of them, but if something comes through with important on it, please have a look at it, because that will be an update on what's happening with us at our center. And if you have enjoyed today and you're part of our center, we really appreciate that you continue to give, even though we're not meeting in person. And you can do that by going online at www.cslvictoria.org, where you can make a donation through PayPal, or using your credit card, or using your debit card. And the thing is that to use your credit card or debit card, you have to read the fine print under PayPal. And then that will take you through to a place where you can fill in the blanks. Or you can simply send an e-transfer. If you do online banking, you can send an e-transfer to donate@cslvictoria.org. We so appreciate your gifts all the time. Some of you are consistent givers through automatic debit at your bank, or through e-transfers, through PayPal. We are so grateful for that. Our bills continue to be sent to us, just like all of our bills do at home, for our center. And so our expenses continue while we're away from our center. And it is you that really makes a difference. You hold the center in your hands and in your hearts. And we are so grateful for all that you do. So bless you all. And I would like to invite Reverend Rachel to do our closing treatment today.
So I invite you to close your eyes for a closing prayer. Thank you. Thank you for giving us the expansive joys of the whole universe in our hearts, the touching of the radiant bliss of the sweet truth of who we are, the abundant, vibrant love force ever flowing from the source, ever flowing, forever flowing through me and out of me, always. Thank you for all that I am. And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you, Rachel. God bless you all. Have an absolutely wonderful week. It's great to see you. If any of you want to stay online to visit for a few minutes, you can turn your audio and video back on again. Otherwise, we'll just see you here next week.